Hi, welcome to People Who Design, a podcast with designers and builders shaping our world through the art and craft of design. I'm Cam Kress, and this week I interviewed Eric Talkar. He's the principal product designer at Square and has been designing products for over a decade. We dove into craft and judgment and why that's so vital in today's world. We talked about the design process and how the landscape is shifting so much, how to use AI throughout the entire design process from ideation to execution, and some overall trials and tribulations of learning these new tools. It was an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. So let's get into it. Eric, thanks for being here. I'm really stoked for this conversation. You know, we've been connected on social for a little while now, and I wanted to reach out to you and have a really good conversation about design. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I was really honored, to say the least, and excited. I've been thinking about this since we met, since we've been chatting, and looking forward to talking design. I love what you're doing. I love the idea that you're giving people a platform, people like myself, to be able to talk design and just chop it up. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, cool. Let's get into it. Maybe we start with I'm always inspired by people how you got into the design and what was the first kind of project that you got in, and what was your kind of background on how you got into design originally?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so there's a long story here, so I'll do my best to keep this as concise as possible. But for me, evolving into a designer, I had actually started more in the arts. Growing up, I was always into art and illustration, just fascinated with the art programs and drawing. That was sort of my bread and butter. And I'd like to say, like, that's where I was really fascinated with developing an eye for detail and just studying how the world works and all these things around me, but I didn't really know what design was. And I never really took the time to consider or acknowledge, like, all of the things that go into the world around me. Who designs the book jacket covers? Who creates movie posters? All of the awnings and branding and menus. I just sort of took those things for granted and thought they were just there. But it wasn't until actually my mother, who's a retired nurse, one of her coworkers, her husband was a graphic designer. And as I was going through the process of just trying to figure out, what the hell do I want to do with my life, and how can I leverage some of my skills to actually have a living and make money, my mom was like, "You should check out graphic design." And I was like, "Oh, what's graphic design?" And we talked about it, and I had done research. Long story short, I was in a vocational, like, commercial arts program in high school. So part of the day I would go to another high school and I would, develop illustration and things. So I was actually in the process of already putting together a portfolio. And so I went through that, and I ended up applying to design school, and I decided to study communications design, graphic design. I actually went to the Pratt Institute, here in
Oh,
Brooklyn, New
cool.
York. And yeah, it was rad. It was pretty, it was very intense, intense education, and it was really focused on communication design and, like I said, graphic design. I also got an associate's degree in illustration, so I very much kept in touch with um, that craftsmanship, that making of things. But now I was introduced to typography, concept, art direction, all of these really interesting things, and I just fell in love with it. Um, at that time, digital, at least for me, wasn't so much of a thing. I had aspirations to still very much be a graphic designer, work at Pentagram or do something
Yeah,
really
one of
awesome
the
like
big
that.
ones.
I had taken a couple web design courses. One, exactly, one of the big ones, like so many others. But I actually got my first job as part of the in-house design agency for DirecTV. They were called the Digital Marketing Group, and that's where I was doing digital marketing design. So I was basically designing for DirecTV.com, and then also creating, like, mini marketing microsites for shows and movies and all of these things that were affiliated with DirecTV.
Mm.
And that's where I got my foot in the door, all things digital design. at that point we were still using Photoshop to create mock-ups and Illustrator,
Yeah.
all the old school. Yeah, even before responsive design was a thing. And then it really just evolved. I got into just started to take on more and more bigger projects. I started segueing into product design and more comprehensive functionality and interactivity. I had then worked for AT&T, and I had led the redesign of AT&T.com's digital brand system and platform, iconography design. And then I actually joined out. So I was there for a while, did a bunch of really cool things. And then I worked at eBay, and that's when I was like really in a product design organization. And yeah, from there it just kind of evolved from eBay to Expedia Group, and now I'm a principal designer at Square, part of Block.
In art school, what was that transition from, going from graphic design to product design for you?
Yeah, I think that the transition was difficult in the sense of like, I think graphic design gave me a lot of the fundamentals that I need to be able to think in terms of static, more so one-off experiences, things that don't arguably don't move as much or don't have as much depth to them. You think about like a poster or a book jacket, or I would do editorial design, so many different things. But I think once I started getting into digital design, naturally the thing that was like the biggest moment of like aha was the fact that this thing is something you can navigate and you can move through, and really had to require an understanding of user experience and all the technical considerations and aspects that went into building things and making these experiences. So I think that was something that was, posed its own challenges, but at the same time was something that excited me so much because I was like, there's nothing cooler than like doing a piece of graphic design and then actually seeing it move and come to life, whether
Yeah.
it's navigating through something or even just like all the cool stuff we used to do on those like movie or TV shows. Like I remember like when The Walking Dead came out and we would do like banner. This is smaller scale when I was like first starting out. I was more junior or I was creating, but like even if you did like a banner for something, you can have the flames like animating or like it's eating
The
away at the
motion.
banner and you just start to exactly like
Yeah.
just can do like all these cool things that like back in the day you wouldn't do that in a static piece of content, and something you know that has that physicality to it. So I think that was really exciting, and then it just evolved from like doing more simpler things, like I said, even just like campaigns and banners, to really thinking about entire websites and web pages, to more traditional, I think, as you would define it, like digital product design of creating systems, and architecture and entire experiences that users move through. So I'm very fortunate. I think the thing to say, like all that to say, I personally feel very fortunate to have that graphic design background. And I actually think in a world where we're going to be having access to all of these AI tools that can automate and create, you'll hear me talk a lot about like having that knowledge of those fundamentals, I think is going to continue to play a critical role.
It's a really good point.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I found that like, and especially at like Square, Square seems to be one of those places that really indexes and values on people with visual design craft. It's
Hmm.
almost expected that you're going to have the user experience component and be able to think through that. But there's this strong requirement, for just getting back to, I always call it like the graphic design and product design, and just being able to know what looks good, have that taste, what works, and how to create balanced and harmonious experiences.
That's a really good point. I think that, maybe about 5 years ago, there was like this hard divide between a UX designer and like a UI designer. And
Yep.
that kind of merged into this kind of product design role. And titles obviously change around that. But like you said, it's like the craft and the visual ability of the designer matters probably more than ever. Even in this world of AI, where you can make anything as quickly as as you can say it in a prompt, but the first output typically doesn't look good. And if you don't have that taste and that judgment and knowing the foundational aspects of design, then yeah, there's other people that are going to be better than you at it. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that like it's funny you mentioned that because like the more and more that I've been using the tools, the more I've been seeing like I feel like at first you're like, oh my God, this looks the output feels very real. It's
Yes.
definitely setting a new bar for what design and what experiences should look. So I think it's on us as creatives now. We have to at least go above that bar. Like there's going to be no room for a designer, unfortunately, as harsh as this sounds, to design any lower than the bar of what AI can output out of the
For
gate.
sure.
But I think like at right, but it's like as I've been using these tools, the more and more you look at it, you're like, this isn't really good. This isn't really right. This isn't really like
Hmm.
there's so much that needs to be done, that needs to be massaged and finessed. And I think having the ability to evaluate that, recognize that, and just not take these outputs at face value is going to be really critical, especially since everyone's going to have access to these tools now. How, as designers, are we going to be able to differentiate ourselves and ensure that we're being respected or considered for what we bring to the table as experts?
So you've been at Square for 3 months now. When you were kind of going through the job, maybe interview process of that, what were some of the things that you were thinking about on how to kind of position yourself in this new world of you know, job requirements are changing around AI fluency, like you mentioned, taste and craft of the actual principles of design. So, how did you think about that when you went into the interview process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I definitely wanted to position. So I had already been designing within the world of AI, but a lot of, obviously like a lot of us consumer facing generative AI solutions. And I wanted to keep doing that. Personally, I feel like it's one of those things, and I know this is potentially controversial with some, and not everybody's on this thinking the same way as me, but I feel like it's kind of hard to stop this train. And I want to continue to adapt and evolve to be able to leverage these tools and be able to offer that, to companies and in service to whatever it is they're trying to building. So I very much um, position myself as an AI forward designer who wants to continue to not just create consumer facing AI experiences, but also leverage AI in the way that I am creating those experiences. So and I think that very much aligns with the expectations at Square. Whereas, like right now, Square is going through a big transformation. I'm sure we see it. Everyone's seen it on the news. I don't want to talk about some of the decisions that have been made around the organization and the company, but I will say that Square is trying to be an AI forward company in the way that we think, the way that we work, not just the products that we create. So there was already when I had met and I was considering taking the job or the potential for the role, there was already an expectation from the recruiter and the hiring manager that designers have to already be using these tools or very interested in using these tools to augment their workflow. Basically, when we were talking about things, we often called it like designing smarter.
Hmm.
How are all of these, whether it's ChatGPT, Figma Make, Cursor, whatever it is, how is it making you smarter, more capable, and more efficient as a designer to be able to do what you need to do faster, um, in a shorter period of time. So, just kind of getting back to your original question of like how I position myself, and if I think if I heard you, if I'm following correctly, like what some of the expectations were for the role and what that required. Yeah, it was very much like AI proficiency, AI optimism, or just
Hmm.
an excitement around what this new world or this new age of being a designer can look like. And then it was, of course, very much focused on like just skills. Square pretty much evaluates, at least now for me, on like three axes. One was skills, like how you do your job as a designer, how you perform. The other one was betterment, if I recall correctly, and that was more so like how you work with others, how you collaborate, how you influence as a leader, the organization, decision making, how you build people up and mentor designers. And then I'm trying to think what was the third one. I think the third one, maybe it was around AI. I'm drawing a blank on that, but I know betterment and skills were like at least the two primary, considerations or factors.
Nice. Yeah, I think every company is figuring this out. My company, I'm at Paramount, and we're in the same position. We really want to kind of drive this new age through an AI forward approach, and that comes with like some confusion too. Is like where does like the canvas fit now? Where does how does the spectrum of ideation play into that upfront design phase? And trying to figure out along that process, along the spectrum, where you can be more efficient. But it's not just about speed, right? It's about quality and maintaining that level of quality throughout those stages. Have you noticed kind of a similar struggle with just trying to define that? It's very easy to create a bunch of stuff, but like you said, it's like you mentioned taste. How does taste then influence that? How would you define taste? Maybe that's a good question, is like, how would you define the taste now, of a designer?
Yeah, I love that question. And, it's always something that seems to come up. I define taste personally as more around how something looks, how something feels, and what is quote unquote good, or what you think is um, at that level of what you define good is. I think it's very much for me focused around more aesthetics.
Hmm.
And it's a sensitivity that like I've developed in looking and trying to decipher between great work and maybe not so great work, and just constantly trying to build up that acumen or that understanding, whether it's keeping in touch with other designers. But I think it's very much a sensitivity and an awareness to the balance of experiences, the visual layout of things, how you move through something, how it
Hmm.
feels, and very much rooted in some of the core primitives of design like typography, color, layout, all of these things. But I think, like, again, with taste, while largely subjective, I think that like I've always tried to identify like what is my taste, or what do I want my taste to be? What do I think when I say, when someone says Eric has good taste, what do I want that to mean? And I think for me, again, it's largely around that I have an ability to create things that feel right, that feel approachable, that feel easy to use, that feel like something that create a degree of calmness, of serenity when you come across it, even if it's something very utilitarian. It could be a
Hmm.
form. I think you can inject a lot of taste in even just forms and very utilitarian experience. So I know I'm kind of like rambling on that, but I think
No, that's a
like the
great
biggest
point.
thing for me is the visual
Yeah.
considerations of an experience.
Yeah, awesome. So how would that skill set help in kind of this world of like generative when you're generating a bunch of different ideas on solving a specific problem, how does taste kind of influence each stage of the design process now for you?
Yeah, I think like I don't feel like I can even talk about taste anymore without also talking about judgment.
Hmm.
And I feel like these are two complementary things that I try to basically balance, because I think that like with all of these tools and the ability for people to create things in the blink of an eye, and not just anything, so many things. Everyone can come to the table with an idea or in a solution. I think that it's both taste and judgment that is going to um, empower designers and teams to be able to create not just things that look good, but create the right things. And I think that's a big thing. Like I often see, like you mentioned it, where like any one of these tools, they create something and you look at it and it's like at first glance, you're like, oh, this looks pretty comprehensive. This feels very real. But I think you need to understand and know that, hey, the design system, maybe that's not the most modern or up to par or not
Mm.
necessarily even appropriate with what we're trying to create. Just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should. Often, and this is where judgment comes into play. A lot of times I'll see a solution or an idea from one of these tools, but it's like, is it really the right thing? Is it solving the right user need? Is it actually laddering back up to one of our business objectives? Um, so I don't know. I think that like taste and judgment are two things that need to be considered simultaneously in order to leverage these tools in the right way and make sure that like what we're creating with them is actually appropriate, actually serves our audience, and represents the brands that we're designing for, whether it's corporate brands or our own personal brand, whatever that may be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I still think the fundamentals of design are still principled in the fact that we're trying to solve a problem for a user, and whatever method it takes to be able to do that, it is kind of the game right now is like trying to figure out exactly how to solve people's problems in, like you said, like an elegant feel way. And, like I think good design is kind of rooted in the difference between like think and feel. You mentioned feel, so it's like sometimes you just feel that difference just from having that experience on what feels right and what feels off. Um, yeah, totally agree with all that. So you've been in your current role for 3 months now. What does kind of what is a principal designer at this point? What's the definition of a principal designer?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, and it's also one that it's funny, we've been chatting about at work, like it does it need to evolve, or how does it evolve with some of the expectations around these tools. I think a principal designer is still, there's an expectation, and it's still very much rooted in being at the highest level, I think, when it comes to experience of design, strategy, execution, and being able to not just think in terms of features, but think in terms of frameworks and systems and set forth the direction that any given domain or product area needs to go. So all the principles at Square are very much expected to take on larger bodies of work, multiple bodies of work, and influence the product and design strategy along with, PMs and engineering. And that's not to say that other designers aren't, but I think it's just one of those baseline sort of expectations. Along with that, I talked about some of the different ways in which Square evaluates its candidates. That what I just mentioned is very much aligned with skills and how you perform your job and just what you bring to the table as a designer. But as a principal, there's also just the mentorship and being that person, that role model that other designers can look up to, that they can lean on. So you're expected to contribute to the design organization and the culture at large, whether that's, again, being like, hey, these are some new tools that I'm using. These are workflows and ways that you can optimize your process, or here's things we should be thinking about. And especially in a remote world, Square's a remote company. I think like there's a greater demand, at least for myself, to be able to bring the designers together when we're not in the same space. It's
Hmm.
it's 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 even more difficult. You're on Slack and people kind of just like break off. And I don't know. I don't know if people traditionally think of some of these things. Maybe they're more aligned with like soft skills or just team building skills. But
Yeah.
I think that's very much an expectation at the principal level. It's like keep everyone engaged, keep the optimism. As far as like the tools, there's an expectation that principal designers and everyone I think at Square right now is leveraging AI at some capacity to optimize their workflow.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we're doing is prototyping via AI, and then there's also this expectation, or this hope, should I say, that we're going to start to be able to more regularly ship PRs, at least for some easier, more polished front end, uh, based thing, tightening spacing, fixing a color, getting the right font, uh, components in place, whatever it may be. And then a lot of principals that I see are even developing their own tools. I'm not quite there yet. I'm excited for the possibility to be hacking away at creating my own, whatever it is that I need to either manage my workload. But I'm seeing crazy, innovative, and inspiring things from across the organization. Um, that again, I'll say not just principals, but again, there's this like you have a greater expectation that at the principal level, this is going to be regular stuff that people are bringing to the table and doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, similar situation with us as well on our company, and I think the roles are blurring so much right now between the what a PM does now, what a designer does now, what an engineer does. It's just all like it's going back to
Yeah,
kind of that feeling of like you're on a startup again, like you're building something
yeah, yeah, yeah,
collectively, and there's like kind of blurred lanes of ownership, which is very I like that environment because it kind of feels like we're all trying to be focused on the outcome together, and there are no lanes that I have to like. I just live in Figma and I have to like spec this perfect design before the engineer picks it up. It's like no, it's like kind of like back to the ground floor again.
yeah. I I think it's kind of funny. I feel like it's gone a little bit full circle. Like when you think about how software was developed back in the day, it was just like an engineer was a designer, was a PM. There
Uh-huh.
weren't like maybe there were, but to the best of my knowledge, there weren't some of these specialized roles. And then somewhere along the lines, we were like, we're going to have a UX designer, a UI designer, we're going to have a PM, we're going to have a front end engineer, a back end engineer, we're going to have a content, we're going to have a writer, a content designer, a researcher, and we
Uh-huh.
started to create all of these specialties, which is awesome. It really allowed us to think, I think, to develop like depth of knowledge and skill. But I find we may be coming back to the more consolidated, where like you can do a lot more with a lot less, for better or for worse. I think the thing you mentioned around like it's exciting and it's nice for us to just kind of blur those lines is plus one. Like I've always felt like good ideas can come from anyone, anywhere. Someone can be
Absolutely.
passing. It's like I've never cared where the idea. I know I've worked in certain companies and organizations, and I'm sure everyone's experienced where like ideas are very sensitive, and you kind of expect certain things from one team, and the designer does another thing. I've personally always felt that good ideas can come from everywhere, and I think now with these tools, it really empowers people to bring their ideas to life. That being said, I am I do think a lot of around like, well, then how do we preserve, like, what does that mean for design? If everyone can sort of become a designer, for lack of a better term, what do designers become? What should we
Hmm.
evolve to become? How do we enhance this new dynamic and this way of working? And I just think it's an interesting question. I don't have an answer. I think some of the things that I've thought about around that are just like goes back to taste and judgment, being able, I think that ability to be able to visualize things that don't exist yet is is and will always be a designer's superpower, even
Hmm.
with these tools, because well, the tools can create and actually make something real. I think it's in the designers, it's required of designers to be able to acknowledge that's not the end. It is, again, is that right? What else could it be? What should it be? And be able to have that foresight. So I think if we can keep refining and honing in on that, we're going to continue to be very valuable. I think the systems thinking storytelling. There's so many things that I think designers should continue to nurture, the things that make us designers that will just become even more critical once everyone has access to these tools, because you're going to need to know what good is, what we should be doing, how to
Yeah.
sell in these ideas, and basically create the right thing. But really funny, actually, going back to your one point around like everyone, I was actually surprised. Like a lot of like the PMs at our job now are prototyping, and every different teams are sort of working in different ways because we're all trying to figure this out at the same time. So I'd say like the culture at the team level can differ. But I've seen some PMs do some pretty robust prototyping, and I'm not gonna lie, like I'm always the first person that's like can check my ego or check. But I was like, I hit up my manager, and I was just like, what like the what do I do now? Because like if they're exploring
Yeah.
low medium fidelity, that's kind of where I feel like I've excelled, especially a principal, because I guess my fear was, and what I would hate to happen for creatives is that we do somehow get pushed back into the pixel pushing or
Exactly.
just
The build
polishing up
stage of
someone
that.
else's.
Exactly.
Exactly, just polishing up. I think like we found a really special sweet spot when we were able to be like, no, we're strategists. We can help highlight direction at that low, medium fidelity, at that lower level. And then, yeah, we do the high five polish and we can get components ready and do that's a given. But I guess maybe that's just a fear of mine is like I would hate to see designers be brought back to that focus area.
Man, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's because like back to the spectrum analogy. It's like I'm personally very interested in always questioning our roadmap. It's like even if it's a set item where it's like leadership has buy-in on something and they're like, we think we should do this, but it's not even actually rooted in any foundational problem that the user has. Maybe it's a business objective, but it's not even being tied back to the user need in any way. And I'm constantly trying to like empower myself and the team to think through like what is this actually solving and is there a better way to do it, because it may be a line item on the roadmap but it could be packaged in a different way than what the company is
Right.
thinking about. And I think that is also the superpower of design, is being able to get closer to the user and understand those needs but also translate them into many potential solutions to that. And I think you're exactly right. This like quest to make designers builders is awesome, where we can execute on the design that we've that's lived in static screens forever. Now we can actually build it. But yeah, you're right, it's like getting pushed into that, like, well, now it's product is giving us exactly what they want us to just polish. And yeah, that's interesting. How do you think that gets prevented?
Yeah, I think it gets prevented in some of the same ways that it's always been prevented. I think it's really on it's twofold. I think one is you would expect or hope that the organization and the culture in which you're working on is kind of setting a clear understanding that like we're all equal, we're working on these things together. Design still maintains that seat at the table, but I think I found that like you can't ever place your bets on anyone else. You can't control what your manager may or may not do or how they might position you. You can't control how others. You really can only control and focus on yourself. And I think it's just going to really rely on the designer to um, I'll give you an example. Let's say a PM, and this is just like even before all the AI tooling, it's like someone gives you a requirement, you can just go take that requirement and go design to it, but you may not agree with that requirement, or you may feel like there's maybe a different way to be thinking about this. I think it's on the designer to yes and to basically maybe be a good partner, build trust, do the thing that's being asked, explore the ideas or directions that
Hmm.
other people are bringing to the table because there is value there. We all work with really smart people, but then if you feel like there's another avenue or there's a way that you're thinking about something go and do that exercise. Go and do it's extra work. It's always more work, but I feel like that's what separates good designers from great designers, and ultimately what takes designers from the the more sort of designer, junior designer, senior designer level up to staff, principal designer. It's just being
Yeah.
able to be like, I hear what you're asking for. We can do that, but here's a couple more options. Here's the reason why I think this one is the right direction to go. And then you support that with data driven, user centric insights and all the things you're talking about, being able to actually draw that to user needs. You can't
Hmm.
argue that. At the end of
For
the day,
sure.
if you present that in the right way, you articulate it, you've got the experience to back it. It just requires more work, more time. But now we've got the tools to do a lot,
Fast. Yeah.
way shorter, faster. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
But I
man.
think that
That's
does that answer your question?
no, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's a very articulate way to position it. And yeah, the more people are kind of upfront together, like coming into that requirement as a collective group, the better it is because then it's like we're all privy to the solving the problem and there could be multiple ways to do that and test it. Yeah, I definitely like I feel like the ability to prototype is at an all-time high and the ability to
Yeah,
get feedback from users is at all-time high and that can help in the decision making process as well. It's like let's just not debate this if this design or that design is better. Let's just test it and see what kind of signal we get from that. And you can do that
I'm
in a matter of a day now. It's like you can get the
absolutely.
feedback right now. um
I
so
mean,
yeah, that's a really
I'm
good point.
I'm loving it. Like personally, and again, I don't know if everyone agrees is on board, but like I'm loving being in Cursor all day and bringing ideas. I still appreciate and love Figma, but like it always the challenge for me in product design was always like these are experiences that you move through that you have to feel. It's the devil's in the details. It's the nuances of when you click on something and what happens. But I feel like so much of that was often missed in based on the limitations of the tools that we can use. Even the best Figma prototypers.
Yep.
I know some people, I'm sure we all know people that do the sickest Figma. There's still that something, it's not real. There's something there. And then it's only
Exactly.
until you see it get in the hands of engineering, they're like, oh shit, like I didn't even see that there. That doesn't quit. But like now you can make it. Like all of the edge cases, all of the
Yeah.
little micro interactions. And yeah, I just tested something. One of my first projects that I tested, I put what felt like a very real experience in front of a user and just seeing them use it and seeing them go through it. It's like I feel like the signals we got, the reactions we got were more real. They were more they were going to help us more than anything else would have in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, yeah, that's spot on. I feel like that ability now is just like exponentially grown so fast where I was a big fan of running design sprints and the Google Ventures design sprint, kind of the methodology around just like getting a team together, making a decision and shipping something by Friday. That kind of idea of
Yep.
just getting something live. And you're exactly right. That limitation has always been to the tool. When Google Ventures and Jake Knapp wrote that book, they actually prototyped with Keynote, which is crazy. I never did that.
I
I was
remember.
like, yeah, I was like, why are you building this in Keynote? Um, but like designing the Figma prototypes and the spaghetti strings all over the artboard, like and then putting that in front of
Yep.
users still was very valuable because you can get a signal into that direction. But now being able to tie in real data or an API into a
Yeah.
prototype is just crazy. I don't even know what's going on behind the scenes, but just my ability to prompt it and hook that up is crazy. I don't understand the code, but it's like, whoa, now the output
Right.
of this prototype is way better than it used to be.
Absolutely. I want to talk about something. You inspired something. You talked about like the design sprint process. And I think that it's really interesting. How do I frame this? I think with everything I said around how cool it is right now and all of the potential with the tools, maybe fear is a strong word, but I think one of the things that I personally want to be mindful of, and the people I work with and the teams I work on, is knowing when to use the tools and when to prototype and when to put something at that fidelity in front of not just users but stakeholders. I think there is an expectation now that it's like, if you can make this thing real, I want to see that experience. But I don't think it should ever come at the cost of problem definition, problem framing.
Yes.
What actually are we making and why? And I'm a
100%.
little worried that people are going to be very quick to make something and it's going to look real. And maybe the audience or the people who are reviewing it aren't really going to fully grasp why it's being made and what, their time is, they're hopping from one meeting to the next meeting and they're having to look. I'm very much still a believer in and hope that we maintain all of the design processes and principles that one should conduct before we actually start putting together high fidelity experiences, if
That's a
that
really
makes
good
sense.
point. 100%. Let's play on that string because I think that's a big one. Like you mentioned, like maybe leadership's expectations where they see this like, like all the designers are creating their individual kind of contributions or prototypes or thinking about, oh, look what I built in a single day, and that's sparking the their minds and their expectations like, oh wow, you could just do this now, you could just build this. But like you said, if that's not rooted in a problem, then what's the point of that? And if we're
Right.
not connected to actually like even connecting that to our design system as well is, and maybe that's another thread we can pull on, is getting it closer to actual the brand identity itself. But yeah, that
Yep.
maybe the leadership's expectations on what it is we're trying to do with these things, and yeah, maybe unpack that a little bit. Do you see kind of leadership's um, um, expectation change with these
Yeah.
tools? Like, what can we do as designers to kind of like still instill that problem solving mentality?
Yeah. I actually do think that, at least through my career, my journey, I have seen that change. Like, joining Square, there's definitely this expectation to move lightning quickly, prototype, and show experience, show the real thing, show the thing that customers are actually going to use, that you intend for them to use. And I think that's valid, that's noble. But I do, we have had debates or discussions around even the value or the role that, like, a presentation still plays.
Mm,
Are we allowed, do we create decks anymore? How do we frame some of these things? Because, like, when I first joined, there were some, and to no fault to anyone, I think they were like, no more decks, no more presentations. And I think that probably was attributed to, like, people creating elaborate decks and going through and telling this story, giving a lot of upfront context. You know how it is. We all know,
yeah,
especially as a manager. And it's like, by the time you get to the work, you're like, oh, okay, that's not quite where it needs to be. But, like, one thing that I've been um, saying a lot of is, like, I think there's a time and a place for some of these things. While I'm eager to also get to the actual experience, it's really important. There is a place for storytelling, for being able to just articulate and frame up. Like, so many times you think everyone's aligned around what it is we're solving or what the problem is, but they're not.
yeah.
They're thinking about things in very different ways. And again, if you jump into a prototype, so I'm kind of going off. It's, yes, there is an expectation from leadership that we're going to get to prototyping very quickly, but there's an expectation of myself, and I think there should be an expectation of designers to be able to not be prescribed how to work, but be
Hmm.
able to determine what is the right artifact at the right, what does the audience need, what does the project need to provide that clarity. So I was like, just a quick example, I had started and I was brought in on a project that another designer had started and they were doing a great job. It was just a very complicated space. It had to do with, like, variations of things. Like, imagine I sell bomber jackets and they come in different sizes and colors and materials. And it's just the way that we had designed that experience for sellers was just really complicated. And there was an expectation, Eric, turn around designs within a week. Like, you've got bring us a solution, bring us the experience. And I remember jumping into one of my first call with a whole bunch of stakeholders, and I was like, we're not looking at experience today. We're not going to look at any designs because I talked to so many of you, and I'm convinced some of you don't even understand how some of these things work. You're not, we don't, the nomenclature isn't shared across the board. So what I did is I went back to old school diagrammatic. What is an item? What is I literally walked through this step by
Wow.
step thing,
Definitions. Yeah.
definitions, and I remember, and then I audited the current experience, just did all the things that like a designer should be doing, but that I feel like in this day and age you might feel the pressure that like maybe that's not the right thing, or that's not where I should start, or I should just throw my brief at Cursor and have it come up with a solution for me. I None of that. Like I really was like, I'm sorry, I heard that you all don't want presentations. I heard that, but I disagree right now. Like
Yeah.
this is the right way to approach it. And nicely, I got people were like, whoa, that was like, I've never been so clear on how these things work and how they connect and what the ecosystem. So then by the time I went and did the designs and I put hi-fi prototypes in front, like it was immediate. Like we were out of the session in 1 hour, everybody gave it thumbs up. It was handed over to engineering, but it's like,
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just worry, like, let's not forget that. Let's not lose that to be able to take a step away from the tools and really be able to assess, are they helping us right now or are they not? And it just goes back to just because we can does not mean we should, you know?
100%. Yeah, they kind of sparked a thought, a quote from, Daniel Kahneman, the economist and author. He wrote that book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And he
I have it
has,
right over here.
oh yeah, I think it was in that book or a different one that he had, but he was talking about data and having all the data, right? But people don't make decisions off of data. They make the decision off of what the story of the data is. And if you can frame up a story out of the data, that's where people make decisions from. So yeah, that I think you're exactly right. It's like not losing touch with the storytelling aspect of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really passionate about storytelling for design, like, and how that needs to evolve. I don't know, I feel like that's always going to be one of the most critical skills that a designer can develop, and maybe one that you don't anticipate you'll need. But you asked also what the expectation is of a principal designer, and I think and I'll always say, what's the expectation for myself? Because I don't want to put it on someone else, but I think the expectation is to be able to tell extremely clear, compelling stories around your work, to be able to bring clarity, align teams, get the buy-in you need, and ultimately move work forward. And I really do think if everyone's creating and putting stuff, and you've got all of this material that you can react to, I think the people who are able to cut through it and actually position their ideas in a way that brings that clarity that actually maps back to, here's who we're solving for and why, here's how, I think those are going to be the people that shine. Um, I don't think that the prototypes necessarily will stand on their own. You're always going to need
Yep.
that, you know, they're going to need that vehicle, that storytelling.
100%. Yeah, for sure. On that note, so like you mentioned, like generating a ton of different ideas, and this prototype can do this and this, and not being able to articulate the problem. But sometimes going back to like the single source of truth, which is prod and production, and getting back to like, like taking a screenshot down, and this is what a series of screenshots of what Prada is right now, and designing closer to that. Um, do you see kind of a disconnect there with the AI being able to output something that's not close to production, or have you kind of experienced like a disconnect there between these tools being outputted something and then trying to connect it back to the original design system? Like, how do you guys think about that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so relevant for us right now. And I don't have it figured out, and I'm constantly poking around trying to figure out who does have it figured out.
Yeah.
Um, where should I start? I think the hope is that we will get to a place where we've got everything sort of plugged into these tools in a way where we can clone our repos, have the design system incorporated, do our explorations, and then kind of feed it back. Ultimately, merge and do things in that capacity. At at Square, what I found is like our repos are so massive and big, and there's just so much technicality involved.
It's
I'm
scary
personally
too.
struggling
It's
with.
like,
It's
yeah, it's
scary.
like,
I'm struggling with it. Like just the other day, I was trying to do like a PR for like updating. I don't know. I saw like a button that was broken and a few other things, and then I realized that like, oh, they're actually on different tech stacks. Like nothing I was doing was working. Like I had the repo cloned, I had it in Cursor, I was trying to make changes. So like I'm being very vulnerable and honest right now and saying like
yeah,
I'm hitting wall after wall, but it's like I feel like I'm getting 1%. I always say as long as I'm getting 1% better every day, that's all I care about. Like
that's awesome.
I
That's
don't
a good one.
expect any home runs here. But yeah, but I do know that like I don't know. I'm trying to answer your question. I think like there are other designers in the company that have figured it out. Like they know how they're like more, they've kind of evolved or they're becoming like design technologists in the sense. And I think that's going to be a bit of an expectation for designers to just
Hmm.
become design technologists, like really understand the code, repos, GitHub, how all these things work together and be able to navigate them. Um, I haven't like right now how I've been prototyping is, and I know it's probably extra work, but I find it's very valuable for me and it's better than where I was. Is I'm very much like taking screenshots of stuff or doing and being like, and then basically like it's like I got like Cursor's just a designer that I'm controlling and telling exactly.
Uh-huh.
And I'm creating experiences that look pretty similar to what's in staging or what's in prod, but it's off, but it's
Yep.
real enough for me to solve the UX problem that I need to solve. But where I'm stuck and where I know this isn't where I need to be is then I'm going and kind of like recreating these things in Figma or going and figure the benefit is
Yeah.
that I have such a clear direction that I'm just, if you throw some music on and you grab the components and figure it out and prep it and then you hand it, I really want to figure out how to get to a place where like the work I'm doing is actually getting us closer to production, to shipping and not having to like redo work. I don't have an answer yet. I'm not as
Yeah.
technical as I think some of my partners are
Yeah.
of
And
where I need to get to.
same, man. I'm in the same exact most of us are in the same exact boat, I think. Like the designers that didn't necessarily come from like that pure technical where they're very comfortable in GitHub. They can clone a repo and they know what's going on. And that fluency, I think, is going, there's definitely an opportunity, I think, for the tool sets and the interfaces to change to help people who may not be as technical and understanding everything to be able to have an interface into that easier. So I do think that it's the worst it's ever going to be right now, So
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
yeah, but yeah, the ability, like there used to be this kind of linear process to design where it's like, okay, maybe I'll start with like this like low fidelity or whiteboarding it and low fidelity, and then I increase the fidelity in Figma, make sure it's using the design system components and everything before you actually like build it out. And that
Yeah.
obviously has completely changed. So we're spending some upfront time, you know, building a prototype, getting this like context of the UX down and the flow. But then there's still a disconnect between that output and the design, and then we go back to Figma. So what is your kind of day-to-day like workflow? You mentioned Cursor. Which model are you using? Claude? Are you using ChatGPT or
Yeah.
Cursors? Yeah. What does that look like
So
between
my
Figma and the
current
canvas? Yeah.
Yeah, so my current and actually and before I get to that, I just want to say that funny story. We were chatting on the side and I was telling you like I'm going through this in real time. I'd be lying if I acted like I've got it all figured out. I lost a week's worth of work trying to merge and use GitHub and whatever because I had forgot to commit. It's like who's thinking about committing when all these programs are auto saving and you're
Yeah.
just like so I did like all this. Luckily, I had videos and screenshots, so I was able to recreate everything in half a day, and I got my job done and everything. But it's just the point of that I'm trying to make is like there's a lot of friction and this stuff is hard and we're gonna fail, and there is a steep learning curve. And I am excited to see these tools get to a place where they can teach and they can
Hmm.
make us like, I would love to get to a place where I'm kind of more considered a design technologist and have that control. So every time I'm using the tools, I am trying to dedicate some time to like, I basically will have ChatGPT up or whatever, and I'll be like, what does this mean? And I'm trying to like teach
Yeah.
myself. It's basically like school as you
Yeah.
can actually ask the program, but the tools that I'm using Cursor with Claude code within it, one of the Opus,
Hmm.
models I generally use. And then I've been loving Cursor. Originally I was using Figma Make, and then I was like, oh God, I got to use Cursor. Like, what's the difference? Excuse me. Cursor is wildly powerful. I So I use that a lot for like planning, execution. There's the different modes
Yeah,
that
I
you can
love that
basically
plan
specify. I
mode.
love that. Exactly. I love it. It's amazing. Um, and then I also use like Chat GPT. I don't know what it is. Like I think I just love Chat GPT. I've just gotten
I
so
do too.
used to it as like an advisor, as like a consultant, as just like
And a therapist,
uh,
it's weird. It's
a
like, oh,
therapist. And I love how it tells me I'm a genius and everything I do
yeah.
is right. Like I need that ego boost in my life. But no, we actually someone at Square developed in ChatGPT so Square's design system is called Market, and shout out to them. I think her name was Andrea, and she's a content designer, and she developed a really cool. It's called Market GPT, and it basically is just like a master everything for the design system. So someone new to Square who doesn't yet know how to wield the design system and what components to use for what. My workflow. So let me take a step back. For me as a designer, I've never. I respect design systems. We need design systems. I love a design system. I never start with a design system. I don't
Same.
want to be restricted. I start with the problem. What should the ideal experience be? I have a wealth of knowledge of what all the patterns are across the web that I can wield at any given moment. So when I'm using curves, I'll put a radio button, we'll do a radio button, we're going to do this. And if I'm not sure, I'm like, hey, what's the best thing for that? That's where I have Chat GPT up. I have Market GPT, and I'll be
Yeah.
like, hey, I want to user to be able to make a decision. Should I use a segmented controller, a radio button, whatever? So I'm just kind of going back and forth between these tools. And then I try to get that buy-in and that clarity as quickly as I can. I'll basically create prototypes, have it hosted within my local dev environment. Um, Square has developed an LLM tool called Goose, which is wildly powerful. It basically can access and manipulate your entire system, your folders. It can ship code. It can do. They've got. It's one of the most innovative. Like I've never worked at a company where they invested just as much internally as they do for external experiences, which is
Wow.
insane. Like yeah, they like the designers just they're making so much stuff. It's a little like intimidating. You're like, dude, like we've got all these tools, but I haven't used Goose as much because Goose is how I lost the week's worth of work, where I was trying to host my work on basically we have this thing called like Blockcell, which is like a hosting platform, so I can send links to whoever and they can access it without it being staged or being pushed, in staging. And it just wasn't working for me. And then Goose was like, "Oh, I can help you clean up your whole thing." And then I like lost a bunch of work. So
Oh
I'm still
man.
a little nervous about Goose, but like all of my friends, all of my peers are like, "No, you need to be using Goose, right? It's basically does everything ChatGPT and some." And I think it's an open source tool. I think anybody can access it, so I would check it out. But
Okay, cool.
that's my tech. Yeah, that's my tech stack. It's primarily like Cursor with Claude, ChatGPT and Market GPT, and then I've been going into Figma and just like my source of truth. But I think I'm catching a little like people are like my manager, she's awesome. She was like raw thoughts on your process. She was like, this is incredibly clear and coherent and comprehensive. Do we need this? Probably. Did this take a lot of work and time? I think so. Is this how we
Yeah.
should be doing things in the future? Is this how we should be doing things in the future? I'm not sure. And I was like, Absolutely. So like I think there's
Yeah.
an like everyone keeps asking like should we be getting out of Figma? Where
Mm.
is our single source of truth? How do you handle we're all trying to figure it out, and I think everyone has a kind of slightly different process right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Have you explored that product paper at all? Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's basically another kind of Canvas tool that is trying to fit more into the AI tools. And I haven't really explored. I can't. I sound probably ignorant right now, but it's trying to like kind of fit that workflow of like going from prompting to the canvas because there's still value in the canvas. For there being able to see ideas visually and on the board where you can just copy and iterate on something, just, alt key drag, create another artboard and just kind of riff off of that. So I definitely think that the camp that's like, you shouldn't spend any more time in Figma, that I don't think that's right either. Like it's like however you make the thing is how you make the thing. So yeah, over the last 6 months it feels crazy, being a
I know.
designer. It's like, what are we supposed to do?
I know. I hope we can get to a place. I'd like where I could just use Cursor and it's got all the components and everything. One of the latest things I've been doing though, which is really cool, is the Figma MCP server plugin, and Cursor just picks up my design. It usually messes up. I don't know. I might have something tethered incorrectly, but I'm able to basically have it pull the data from my Figma application into Cursor, which is like a step closer to where I would like to be. And it's just
Yeah,
about like how do we get closer and closer?
for sure. And man, you mentioned Figma Make. I'm a fan of Figma, but Figma Make, oh man, I don't know. I was just like every time I like connect it to the artboard, it's like doesn't come out anything looking like maybe it's my prompting skills, I don't know, but it's kind of there's a disconnect even within that. That just takes some finessing and massaging. But I heard this someone mentioned that like we're so early right now and these tools are like it's so primitive to where it's going. It's just hopeful. I'm very hopeful that the tools are changing and evolving and our workflows are going to change and mold even more. But I'm super excited for the future. I love the learning aspect and learning these new things. So yeah, that's what I would definitely encourage other designers to just do. It's just, not be afraid of failing and not be, like you said,
Yeah,
like make it, not committing your work and then it disappears. It's like, it's all right. We're all trying to figure it out. So, yeah.
absolutely. I think like, a degree of humility and just vulnerability is key. And it might be harder for designers to do that because I feel like even when it came to like sharing our work, like you don't want to. It was always tough to show the like the sausage making or like whatever you
Yeah.
call it, and it's like you want everything to position you as like you got it figured out, but it's like we gotta throw that out the window and just realize we're all in this together and we're learning these things together. And you know, one quick thought that I just wanted to say: I hope that Cursor can develop a way for better collaboration. I think that's been a big
Mm.
pain point for me that I did like with Figma Make. It's like you could just share it and other people. I'm sure there are collaborations, but like I hate this idea of like having to host my work or do something legit in order for people to access it. Like I hope they
Yeah.
can do something a lot simpler,
That's a
you
good
know?
point. Yeah, more less complicated than, forking and merging and then sharing,
Exactly.
and then someone else pulling down your version of GitHub. Yeah, it's convoluted for sure. That the ability to just like click a share link is way more accessible. So I totally agree with
But I
that.
think it's probably created for a different audience, again, more tech savvy, engineer driven, focused design engineers, whereas Figma Make seems to very much have been catered to designers
Uh-huh.
without needing to understand all of the technicality involved. So I don't know, maybe it's not appropriate for their product and their brand, but that's something is like, we talked about like how do we get to a place where we can start to learn how to do these things technically and sort of ramp up to being more of a design technologist. kind of need a little bit of hand holding there when it comes to collaboration would be nice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. How is that kind of that side of the process work for you guys to work closer with engineering? Like what's the dynamic between design and engineering there?
Yeah, so with all the recent changes, I think we're trying to figure that one out. Recent events have definitely like rocked the system and the ways in which we work. But um, I've only been there for 3 months, so my experience was has still very much been like I've been sharing those prototypes along with the Figmas to my engineering partners. And then the beautiful thing is they've been able to more agile based. Like before I have any Figma ready, as soon as the prototype's ready, they've been building off of the prototype, and then I've been following up with some of those Figma so we're
Okay.
not waterfalling, we're not waiting. There's so much that they can get going with the infrastructure of an experience just based off of those in-depth prototypes alone and starting to map, okay, that's this component, that's whatever.
Hmm.
So, um, and then we've been working with, we have a design technology team, we have design technologists, and they've really been helping to, it's kind of like a focus. I don't know if it's part of like design ops or what, but they've been helping to get all designers leveled up with these tools and with teaching us how to get GitHub set up, get accounts set up, how to basically navigate that space, how to uh, clone branches, merge, all of that, and then push PR. So we actually had a requirement that everyone had to push at least one PR to like a design sandbox. It was a safe environment. We weren't affecting any customer experience. Just like nobody can break anything. And it was just fun. Like people would create like whatever. Like I basically like reimagined really quickly what I thought like creating a listing or an item on Square can look like and then put that up just to go through the motions, just to go through the process. So they're investing a lot in that. What does that look like in how we work with engineering? I don't know yet. I would think we need to get to a place where we can start to handle more of the front end, the fit and fit finish. And again, get those prototypes in real code with real components so close to, I would assume that engineering then steps in to really refine, make sure it's connecting to the back end in the right ways, pulling in whatever APIs we need and making sure the day and playing more of that role. I could be wrong, but that's where I would hope to
Yeah.
get as a designer.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, I just have a few more questions and then we can wrap. What would you say, I know that the job market is kind of crazy right now. So many designers are trying to, either find another job that they're laid off or they're just getting into the field. And that's a whole different world, I think, than where we might have started a decade or so ago. What would you say to new designers coming in? What are those things that they should be thinking about, or how to kind of, I think you mentioned it in the storytelling aspect and being able to articulate these problems. But is there anything else that you would say to, you know, designers out there that are either looking for a job or trying to, tap into
Yeah,
the space?
I think the first thing before I even get into like the skills and some of the just things you would expect one to say when it comes to being a designer is just like give yourself grace. It's patience. It's being able to manage just what's going on and what's expected of you right now as an expert. I think that's something that has never changed, but it maybe is becoming even more so important. There's going to be so many tools, so many things. So it's just like take the time, give yourself realistic expectations as you're learning new things. And I talk about just getting 1% better every day. It's just like learn something, pick it up, and just give yourself grace and manage the anxiety or anything that's kind of associated with work as best as you can, because I think it's personally I've gone like this in my career where it's been very heightened and you know there's a lot of pressure. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
I think I think the most important thing is creatives, especially with these tools, is being able to refine the way you think, like getting to a place where companies are hiring you for your brain and not necessarily for the way you wield the tools. I would always start there and advocate people. The tools are going to change. It's Cursor today. It might be something tomorrow. They might come up. So I think like the most important thing as a designer is refining and honing the way that you view the world, the way that you think about your ability to understand problems, your ability to connect and reason with people. Communication skills, I think, are going to be very critical for designers, even more so. And then kind of going back to what we talked about, taste and judgment, I think it's being able to develop uh, a sense of taste that is refined, that is elegant, that is able to take complexity and just distill it down into something really simple, really beautiful, and then have that judgment, that ability to know what's right, what's wrong, what should we be doing, and I'll say it again, just because we can doesn't mean we should. So and then I think all of this, the tools and the skills, I think knowing how to leverage AI and finding a stack and a workflow that works for you, where you have, again, I've got my cursor, I got my chat GPT. Find what works for you that allows you to move quickly, think clearly, um, and just like don't be afraid to change. I think that's actually one of the greatest powers probably in new designers. Some of us old cats are maybe a little stuck in our way. It's been a little bit harder to be like, all right, like I gotta like tear it all down to the studs
Yeah,
again. Like what is a designer now? But I think like being open-minded is one of the greatest things that you can bring to a company, to yourself, to the people you work with, to just not like be so stubborn about how
for
creative
sure.
should get done and just be open. Creative can get done in so many different ways. It's okay to go into the proto. It's okay to make something first and then edit and converge. Or you might want to start, like I said, diagrammatically and then get just experiment. It's a lot. There's a lot of
Absolutely.
things, but yeah, I think just keep using the tools and surround yourself. I think this is the most important thing. Try to find people that you look up to, that you kind of want to be like, and try to surround yourself with them and network. Like, look at what we're doing. Like, this is
Yeah.
awesome. Like, we just met on LinkedIn, and it's like,
Yeah.
this is what it's about, sharing ideas. I could be wrong, and so you're offering perspective on things, and find people and just try to learn as much as you can.
I love it, man. I think that's a good ending point. I appreciate the wisdom and the insights of this. This has been great, man. Where can people find you? Where I can link to LinkedIn for sure. Anywhere else people can look you up?
Yeah, yeah, I would. I've got my site up. It's always a work in progress. I think everyone knows how that is, but it's
Oh yeah,
Eric
it's never
Talker.
ending.
Yeah, erictalker.com. So I would say LinkedIn and erictalker.com. I'd love to connect with folks. And again, I'm just so excited for this new age of design and what it means. I'm really eager to learn from everyone around me. And I really appreciate you having me on this show, on this podcast. Like it's been such an honor to just be able
Awesome.
to chop it up and talk design with you. So thank you so
Well,
much.
let's run it back, man. Let's go maybe do a part two one of these days and we can go deep into workflow maybe or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said about like, just like almost like removing the labels of what creativity is. It's like this is what a designer does, but I think you summed it up way better than I could, which is just like make the thing. So that's kind of what I'm doing as well as I would love to maybe run it back with you and we can go into another topic.
Yeah. I actually think like that's I think we all hear that saying, and that was a big saying at Square too. It's like for designers, for myself, whenever I get to a place where I'm kind of stuck, I just always come back to this notion of show, don't tell. I'm a firm believer, and at the end of the day, it's better to make something, even if it's the wrong thing, and get people to react to it quickly than it is to, again, that's the superpower of designers. Now everyone's going to have an ability to do that, but it's like make things, try to make things quickly. But one last thing, sorry, not to preach, is let's as a community just not give up the craft and the we're being expected to design and move faster, but sometimes we kind of got to slow it down. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's
I
like
love
the
it.
thing I always say to myself.
I love that, man. Yeah, in this world, for sure, identifying the signal versus the noise is critical.
Yep,
Even going back to paper sometimes is just writing your thoughts down on pencil and paper and just, yeah, thinking through things, slowing it down. I love it, man. Well, awesome. Thank
cool.
you again, Eric. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad we connected, and look forward to more discussions.
All right, thank you so much, Cam. I appreciate
All right,
you.
man. Cool. See ya.
Peace.